Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, we're going to continue talking about the ongoing water crisis, this time not focusing on the United States and the West Coast, but Mexico this time. They're seeing many problems down there. A little bit about migrants who are looking or have been looking for a better life. We've been hearing a lot about the migrant crisis and getting across the borders. Some presidents were holding them back. Some presidents were saying they can come. Well, a lot of them have ended up dying in their quest to get to the United States for a better life. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about NATO planning to expand. Not great news for Russia. But first, we're talking about Monterrey. That's right, Monterrey, Mexico, where the water has been running dry. Availability is becoming scarcer as residents have been desperately trying to find water sources for their everyday living needs. One resident has been filling up water from a local municipal water tank, saying that it's the only water available for drinking.
Well, city officials have been limiting water access to 6 hours a day. Now, the water shortage has been leading to growing public anger. Many citizens say that the actions of public officials to meet the needs of residents has not been enough. Now, with water being shut off at 9 a.m. and not returning until the next morning, many stay awake all night just to be able to fill up water bottles and buckets as soon as the taps start flowing again, even if it's just for a short while.
Wow. Well, with more than half of Mexico experiencing moderate to severe drought conditions, the president of Mexico has placed part of the blame on the water shortage on water bottling companies and their excessive extraction of water.
Well, President Flores said in a speech that there needs to be better planning in the future as many plants that have been installed use excessive amounts of water where there is simply not enough water. Well, he assured that the situation will be resolved as many are helping in both the government and private sector.
The two main dams that supply water to Monterrey, the metropolitan area of that city, home to some 5.3 million residents, could run dry as early as, we're not talking about months or years, but Tuesday. Wow. Just a few days. Yeah, that's right. Many are hoping seasonal rains that accompany the hot summer months will arrive soon to put an end to the worsening and growing drought.
Wow. Very hard to live without adequate amounts of water.
You have to have water for sure.
Well, in San Antonio, Texas, a tractor trailer carrying migrants seeking a better life from parts of Mexico, Honduras, and Guatemala was the final resting place for 53 of those people who died in a hot and stuffy environment not suitable for human existence. 4 people have been arrested and 2 have been charged in the crimes of those deaths.
The driver of that truck appeared in federal court facing human smuggling charges, resulting in the deaths of 53 victims. Communities in the U.S. and abroad are both angry and heartbroken over these tragic events. Adults and children were among the dead, including 2 13-year-old cousins traveling 1,500 miles in search of a better life for themselves and their families. Well, in Mexico, families are now having to endure waiting for the bodies of their loved ones to be returned for burial.
Well, one mother said that after she went to the Office of Foreign Relations, she was told that they had found her son's ID in one of the body bags and to get ready to receive his body. Now, she remembers her son's last words. He said, "Send me your blessings." Now, while some families cope with the unexpected deaths of loved ones and the return of their bodies, others are still waiting to hear word about the whereabouts of their family members.
Yolanda Olivares Ruiz, a mother of 2 young men, said her boys are missing and no one has told her anything. Day and night, they don't get any sleep, she said. And Jeff, I'm sure that, their hope is that those two boys are at least alive and well, and that they'll get some type of information, because, that's the concern that any parent would have regarding their children being so far away from home.
Right. It's amazing. Some of those traveling so far,
Yeah.
and at a young age, and what they're thinking is a search for a better life.
To make it into the United States, only to die there because of negligence.
Right. Well, we're now going to turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who's been covering several stories for us, including the South Sudan famine, the monkeypox that we talked about last broadcast, and now is picking up a little bit more steam. But first, he does have a few more details on these 53 migrants that died in this tragic situation. Larry, what do you have for us?
Geopolitics among the world's leading powers is producing major upheavals in the globe's status quo. The economies of the world's leading nations are taking hard hits, and smaller nations even more so. Amid all of this, the idea of the American dream has become even more alluring for citizens of nations wrapped in the misery of severe poverty, with the result that many are seeking to enter the U.S. illegally for the hope of gaining income to send back to their families. It is a noble intention, but the sad part is that it often ends in tragedy, in the least case being discovered by immigration officials and returned back to their countries empty-handed, and in the worst case, losing their lives. In a harrowing and heartbreaking turn of events, the latter was the case with 53 people coming from various parts of South America who were recently found dead inside a trailer truck in San Antonio. The story is still unfolding, but there have recently been reports of 4 arrested regarding the incident so far. The charges are federal and include human smuggling and crimes resulting in the deaths of the deceased. It is overwhelming to witness the grief of the families responding to the news of the loss of their loved ones, who must now also wait for the arrival of the corpses of those who left promising to build a better life for them. It is not altogether an issue of money, though. Religious officials say a significant portion of migrants are fleeing from injustice and oppression, fleeing literally in some cases, like another incident in Ensenada, Texas, where 4 immigrants lost their lives in a deadly car crash, attempting to evade border officials. Other officials in the U.S., after reporting cases of monkeypox starting to surface in the states, have begun to mobilize a vaccine effort to confront the spread of the disease. Globally, the detected number of those afflicted with the pathogen is at 5,000, identified in 49 countries. The World Health Organization says the affliction can be contracted by anyone, but at present, it is primarily affecting homosexual men. They have also stated that the disease is not an international public health emergency at the moment, but that could quickly change. The U.S. government has a scheduled vaccine rollout in the tens of thousands heading deeper into the summer, but experts say it is too little, too late, and the world could be headed into this next pandemic. It is becoming more and more difficult for nations to ascertain when they will receive their next rain. The global drought conditions, combined with the war in Ukraine, have plunged over 1 million people in South Sudan into famine and starvation. The people in the region are surviving off of wild roughage and the doles from the World Food Program, who says they are being forced to take from the hungry to feed the starving. Where there is food, it is priced out of the reach of the poor, who are suffering from the absence of Ukrainian wheat imports into the country. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Good time, Jeff. Back to you.
Well, we're seeing that across the board with the increasing drought, that many more people are having even less than they did before the drought to have their needs met.
And that statement about taking from the hungry to feed the starving, we're starting to hear that a whole lot more. Our food is definitely not where it should be. We're really looking at facing this food crisis.
Yeah, indicative of a worsening global situation. Well, what does the Vice President of the United States think about the Supreme Court's decision to reverse the abortion laws for Roe versus Wade? Well, you can hear for yourself in a portion of a speech she delivered the same day the verdict was made. Take a listen.
And I had planned to speak about our strategy for improving care for pregnant women and mothers across our country. And as you know, on the way here, however, we learned that the United States Supreme Court had rendered its decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. Here's what that decision means. For nearly 50 years, We have talked about what Roe v. Wade protects. Today, as of right now, as of this minute, we can only talk about what Roe v. Wade protected. Past tense. This is a healthcare crisis. Because understand, millions of women in America will go to bed tonight without access to the health care and reproductive care that they had this morning, without access to the same health care or reproductive health care that their mothers and grandmothers had for 50 years. This is the first time in the history of our nation that a constitutional right has been taken from the people of America. And what is that right? Some might ask. It's the right to privacy. Think about it as the right for each person to make intimate decisions about heart and home. Decisions about the right to start a family. This opinion also says, when you read it, that abortion is not deeply rooted in our nation's history. They offer that in the opinion as a foundation for the decision they render today. In holding that it is not deeply rooted in our history, today's decision on that theory then calls into question other rights that we thought were settled, such as the right to use birth control, the right to same-sex marriage, the right to interracial marriage. The great aspiration of our nation has been to expand freedom. But the expansion of freedom clearly is not inevitable.
Well, the vice president there being, having to be somewhat careful in how she responds to the recent decision, but you can tell she has a little bit of displeasure there in the decision of reversing Roe versus Wade.
That's right.
Well, the heads of the NATO alliance met for a 3-day summit at the end of June. Now, there was a lot of talk, but some big decisions were made also. President Biden has promised to increase the United States military presence in Europe. Now, other NATO leaders followed suit. The war in Ukraine has entered its 5th month, and NATO continues to show its support for Ukraine.
President Joe Biden said he will send U.S. military forces into 9 European countries, and this will include 2 new Navy destroyers to Spain, 2 F-35 squadrons to the UK, and an additional combat brigade to Romania. They will also be sending military personnel to Italy, Germany, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia along the Russian western border, which is of great concern to Russia.
Right. John Kirby, the National Security Council spokesman, had this to say, quote, "We want to make sure that we send a very clear message to Mr. Putin that as President Biden said, we are going to defend every inch of NATO territory."
The Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov, warned that Russia could take what he called compensatory measures and said they not only have the capabilities, but the resources as well. Ukrainian President Zelensky could only speak to his counterpart via the internet, but let them know even with the aid being sent, Ukraine is still outgunned.
Well, Zelensky's deputy chief of staff was able to travel to the summit in Madrid and explain to CBS Evening News, quote, "We are getting almost all the pieces of weapons we want, but not in enough quantity. Now, the leaders of NATO say they are bracing for a long-term conflict.
Some historic news came from the summit as well. It was announced that Finland, Sweden would join NATO alliance. Russia was strongly opposed to more countries joining, and now Turkey, who was once in agreement with Russia, is no longer in objection to the two countries entering into the alliance.
Well, one of the main reasons for Putin's attack on Ukraine was to send a message to NATO to stop expanding. But now it appears that because of Russia's move, NATO has a new purpose to strengthen its alliance.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, better known as Brics, also gathered for a summit, albeit a virtual one. The 5 leaders each came to the meeting with their own agendas. India's was concerning mutual economic interest. Russia's focus was on how to bypass Western sanctions. But China had the most ambitious plans. They proposed that BRICS be used as a forum to rival the U.S. But how can only 5 countries take on the power behind the United States?
Well, China's idea? Simply to take on more members and expand BRICS. Argentina and Iran have already applied to join the group. Now, why these 2 countries? Well, both are rich in their own resources, have emerging economies, and of course, most importantly, they don't support the Western system. So, quite a few big moves here taking place in the world with Sweden and Finland now joining NATO, since Turkey, the one that opposed their joining, has given his okay. So, they're going to be joining, which we saw Russia clearly stated they didn't want, as you mentioned, on their western border, that buildup there. Right. But then also with BRICS now, adding some countries in there that don't want to have anything to do with the West. So, it's really, these are some pretty big moves taking place at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And what we can see internationally is lines being drawn separating 2 parts. And those 2 parts, of course, being allies, are going to come together to support one another, especially when the tensions grow so high that eventually there's going to be a trigger that will lead to nuclear war.
Yeah, and there's really not any fuzziness in the lines. They're very clearly drawn. Everybody is showing where they stand.
That's right.
Well, if you want to learn more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh. When you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all international calls, please dial the number on your screen. And don't forget the aids to assist you in the study of the scriptures and to stay up to date with current prophecy. The Yisrael Says and Ask Yisrael programs are available 24 hours a day online. You can find those by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another exciting message from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.